It's December 27th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with South Korea's independent sanctions on North Koreans. 8 North Korean individuals are now on South Korea's blacklist for their involvement in illegal arms deals and illicit cyber activities. The sanctions came in response to North's intercontinental ballistic missile launch on December 18th. Over in Gaza, the Israeli military is reportedly taking steps to shift from a high-intensity military operation to a low-intensity and long-term strategy. According to Israel's army chief, the war against Hamas militants is far from ending. Inflation expectations for December here in South Korea dropped compared to the previous month due to a downward trend in consumer prices. The 3.4% figure is the lowest in over a year and a half. South Korea has blacklisted 8 North Koreans believed to be involved in generating funds for the North's nuclear and weapons development. Now, Seoul warns Pyongyang will pay the price for military provocations in any shape or form. Choi Min-jung reports.
South Korea has slapped a fresh round of sanctions on North Korea in response to the regime's most recent launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile on December 18th. Seoul's foreign ministry announced Wednesday that it has targeted 8 individuals. All 8 were reportedly involved in generating profits for the North Korean regime and financing nuclear weapons and missile programs through illegal cyber activities and trading sanctioned materials, including weapons. Among those on the list is Lee Chang-ho, the head of the regime's Reconnaissance General Bureau, also known as the organization behind North Korean hacking groups such as Kim Suk-hee, Lazarus, and Andariel. Lee is accused of earning foreign currency and stealing technology through illicit cyber activities. Park Young-han was also sanctioned for trading weapons-related goods on behalf of Korea Mining and Development Trading Corporation, North Korea's primary arms dealer. North Korean diplomat Yoon reportedly traded lithium-6, a UN-prohibited nuclear-related item. The remaining listed individuals are affiliated with Pan Systems Pyongyang, an organization sanctioned by the South Korean government in 2016, and were involved in trading North Korean-made weapons. South Korea's foreign ministry also warned that Pyongyang's provocations would come with a price. It vowed to cooperate more closely with the international community, including the U.S. and Japan, to ensure that the regime realizes that it must stop its provocations and engage in denuclearization talks. With the sanctions now in place, those wishing to engage in financial transactions with these individuals must obtain permission from the governor of the Bank of Korea or the Financial Services Commission. The latest measures are the 14th round of sanctions to be put in place against Pyongyang since the beginning of the Yoon administration. Since October last year, South Korea has targeted 83 individuals and 53 institutions. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
In the meantime, North Korea reportedly kicked off its year-end plenary meeting on Tuesday, with leader Kim Jong-un attending. According to the regime's state-run media on Wednesday, Kim attended the plenary meeting of the Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea to review policies for this year and discuss more for next year. He reportedly called 2023 a year of a great turn and change and referred to progress on the path toward enhancing national power and promoting national prestige. Kim is widely expected to deliver a speech to unveil new policies for 2024 before the end of the meeting. Wrapping up 2023, President Yoon reflected on the country's economy and outlined strategies for 2024. And recovery in exports that aims for a broader economic rebound will remain top priority in the coming year. Shin Se-byuk with more.
President Yoon said the economy took a turn upward in 2023, and that improvement in exports will drive the country's growth next year. This as President Yoon reflected on the year 2023 and discussed strategies for moving forward into 2024 during a cabinet meeting at the Sejong government complex on Tuesday.
정부는 수출 중심의 회복세가 민생과 직결되는 내수 회복으로 이어질 수 있도록 서비스 산업을 집중적으로 지원할 것입니다.
This initiative particularly focuses on the content industry, a field that is rapidly gaining traction among future generations. President Yoon also highlighted the strategic development of high-value sectors like finance and biohealth. In addition, he vowed to focus his efforts on invigorating local economies with a special emphasis on enhancing the tourism and food industries. Yoon's emphasis on nurturing domestic economies through export-led strategies came as South Korea is projected to post some $30 billion for this year's current account surplus. He thanked the people for making it possible.
파탄난 재정과 무너진 시장 경제를 복원하기 위해 노력해온 정부를 믿어주시고 협력해 주신 국민과 기업인들 덕분이라고 할 수 있습니다.
During the meeting, President Yoon also addressed his dedication to implementing 3 key reforms in the areas of national pension, labor, and education. He said these tasks must be pursued to the end to elevate the nation's growth potential. He also highlighted further reforms in the medical sector, including plans to raise the enrollment quota of medical schools to ease deepening regional disparities in medical services. President Yoon also pledged a swift development of strategies through intensive discussions, given its urgency in safeguarding public health. Regarding the government's fiscal plan for next year, recently passed in Parliament, he said it reflects the government's sound fiscal policy principle and called on the cabinet for a swift execution of the budget. Yoon also vowed to do his utmost to enhance the people's quality of life and reaffirmed his commitment to dismantling barriers between government bodies to enable stronger collaboration across the board. 신세벽, Arirang News.
And 2023 was quite an eventful year on the diplomatic front. We look back on the highlights of President Yoon's diplomacy in the global arena this year in keywords. Here's our top office correspondent, Oh Soo-young.
South Korea's trilateral cooperation with the United States and Japan was at the core of President Yoon Suk-yeol's summit diplomacy in 2023. First, South Korea's military-focused alliance with the US, based on the Mutual Defense Treaty signed 70 years ago, became a global comprehensive strategic alliance, broadening their scope of cooperation to areas like tech, climate, energy, and more. This came as Presidents Yoon and Joe Biden announced the Washington Declaration in April, amid North Korea's growing nuclear threat, setting out new measures to boost confidence in America's extended deterrence policy. This created the creation of the Nuclear Consultative Group, under which the two sides will discuss and develop joint nuclear response guidelines to a potential North Korean nuclear strike. The document was also a major step towards the Camp David trilateral agreements with Japan in mid-August. After the rapprochement between Seoul and Tokyo, the three leaders inked documents on their shared commitment and course of action for Indo-Pacific security and prosperity, joint responses to North Korea's security threat through missile information sharing and combined military drills, and an agreement to consult each other on regional security challenges. With over a dozen diplomatic trips this year, the South Korean leader also expanded Seoul's diplomatic horizons, given the continued geopolitical risks to global security and economies that challenge the post-war world order of globalization, free trade and multilateral institutions. Thus, Yoon has been pushing for value-based multilateral cooperation for a rules-based world order to stabilize trade and regional security and tackle climate, digital and global development challenges. He pledged Seoul's contributive diplomacy, even visiting Ukraine to show South Korea's value-based solidarity and leading global discussions on establishing new digital norms on areas like artificial intelligence. But particularly with a focus on economic security, Yoon called himself the salesman of Korea, aiming to procure critical supply chains and energy sources and strike up partnerships on developing new advanced technologies for South Korea's export-dependent economy. Major deals include the Downing Street Accords with the UK on deepening security and economic ties, including jointly developing quantum technology that could neutralize North Korean missiles. A semiconductor alliance was forged with the Netherlands to work on cutting-edge R&D in the technology, which is South Korea's #1 export item. Yoon also strengthened ties with Southeast Asian countries, sealing deals on mineral cooperation and closer trade with Vietnam and Indonesia. State visits to the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia and Qatar, followed by a bilateral free trade agreement with Abu Dhabi, marked a new timely chapter for South Korea's Middle East diplomacy, as the post-oil era brings both crises and opportunities to Arab states as crude suppliers and South Korea as a major importer. Next year, economic security will likely continue topping the diplomatic agenda as Seoul looks to develop new export industries in areas like bio, defense, smart agriculture and nuclear plants. Seong, Arirang News.
Over in Gaza now, the Israeli military is reportedly preparing to transition into a low-intensity, long-term strategy. The change of action comes as the Israeli defense chief says the Gaza war will last many more months. Lee Seung-jae reports.
The Israeli military says it's now preparing to shift its war operations from high-intensity fighting in Gaza to a low-intensity, long-term military action. The move comes as Washington has been calling on Israel to ease up on its heavy bombardment of Gaza and focus its attacks on Hamas infrastructure to limit civilian casualties. Israel Defense Forces Chief Herzi Halazi said Tuesday that its military is expanding its fighting in southern and central Gaza, adding that it is close to dismantling all Hamas battalions in northern regions. He said many Hamas soldiers and commanders have surrendered, with hundreds being held prisoner. However, he warned that the fight would last for many more months, saying there can be no shortcuts taken when dismantling an entire organization. While the armed conflict in Gaza nears the 3-month mark, the World Food Programme warns that as the humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip is worsening, the region has now entered the so-called food crisis stage. The WFP announced on Tuesday that all 2.2 million residents of Gaza are in a state of acute food insecurity. The UN agency regularly evaluates and predicts the food situation in Gaza, with the recent assessment forecasting the situation from December to February of next year. Meanwhile, the UN named an outgoing Dutch minister as its humanitarian coordinator for Gaza on Tuesday. Sigrid Kaag, who had been the Netherlands' deputy prime minister and finance minister since January 2022, will oversee the humanitarian situation in the region. The appointment comes as the UN Security Council last week called for the safe and unhindered delivery of humanitarian assistance at scale, but did not call for an immediate halt to fighting. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Goldman Sachs is hopeful the global economy will top expectations in the new year, driven by strong income growth and the long-awaited end of aggressive rate hikes. What will define the economy in 2024? We turn to Professor Song Soo-young. Welcome back, Professor.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Goldman Sachs chief economist Yoon says the great disinflation is underway and that in much of the world by next year, inflation will be normal. Professor Song, what's your take on this?
According to the Goldman Sachs report, they have addressed the global issues about the disinflation is underway. Well, clearly, it is very evident in the United States and also Europe area. So it is really, the disinflation is better than expected, which means that what I'm concerned right now, this is clearly the good news to the investors worldwide, because which means that the declining inflation implies that the real rate of return or real interest rate is increased a little bit. So, which means because of the declining inflation. But the problem is because nominal interest rate is remains until now quite high for the economy. So, what I'm concerned right now is the prospect of we have to deal with take into account of the effect of the high interest rate on the economic recovery or growth rate. So, which means the recession might be unnecessarily caused by high interest rate. So, the interest rate is expected to decline over the next year, but the frequency of the declining interest rate, according to U.S. Federal Reserve, and also in the euro area, clearly they will decline the interest rate. But how big is the effect, or how much frequently it has declined? Some economists is concerned about too hasty declining interest rates, such as, for example, the Arirang has been concerned about that. They recommend a gradual decline of interest rate. But I'd like to say much faster declining interest rate would help the economy to sustain the current level of the growth rate and recovery of the economy.
So, according to you, quicker maybe the better. Professor Strong, it's also not an exaggeration to say the year 2024 is a global election year with around 40 countries expected to carry out their own elections. And one of the most attention-grabbing ones is in the U.S. in November. And some analysts are afraid that if Donald Trump comes back as a U.S. president, it may lead to the worst economic challenges seen yet not just in the U.S. Now, Professor Strong, how? Please explain to us.
Yeah, considering the weight of the U.S. economy over the global economy and the effect of the Federal Reserve or the political situation in the U.S. must have a greater influence on the world economy, as well as the growth rate return or recovery of the growth rate. Clearly, Donald Trump, to that regard, because he is notorious for his inconsistency and the incoherence. So, considering that, because Donald Trump has blamed Biden when during the last presidential election in the U.S., he claimed that the global stock, U.S. stock will be declining because of the Biden. Right now, the stock market in the U.S. has performed very well, quite well. Then he blamed the Biden administration's could have a very, the effect is just to make the richer stock to be richer. So he has blamed some divergence among the inequality because of the Biden administration economic policy and stock market resurgence. So to that regard, it is not a news. The Donald Trump has been always inconsistent blame over the U.S. The issue is because he is change or reverse all the policies, economic policy, as well as diplomatic and the political policy in the U.S. as well as worldwide, all but Biden administration. To that regard, that is very anticipate whether the president, the Donald Trump could be or will be elected as a U.S. president. That is the key issue. But recently, the state of Colorado has declared that Donald Trump should not be listed in the U.S. presidential ballot. So how that could be a signal or harbinger that Donald Trump cannot be listed in the U.S. presidential election. But we have to wait and see because of United States are always composed of several states which has decided their own state policy independently of each other. Clearly, there is some kind of effect over each other, but so to that regard, that is uncertainty. But still, I believe is currently the Biden administration's posture has been improving a little bit in regard to the U.S. and China conflict. And also Biden administration put the pressure on the Israel and also decided to a little bit pull their leg or pull their involvement out of the U.S. and Russia, the Russia and the Ukraine war. So that means the intensity of the war or the conflict could be a little bit should be reduced, would be reduced most likely in year 2024. To that regard, the uncertainty cannot be increased. I think it will be decreased. So that would be a very favorable environment for the economy. And however, regarding the Korean diplomatic policy and the security policy and economic policy, currently, as far as I'm concerned, the Korean economy or policy has been dominated by some diplomatic consideration and the political consideration. So that is a little bit, I would like to balance, a little bit more balanced and improved posture is required for the Korean economy to come back to what it used to be on the normal path of the economic growth.
All right, Professor Song Soo-young, thank you as always for your insightful comments. You have a great day.
Thank you for inviting me. Yeah.
Inflation expectations for December fell compared to the previous month amid a downward trend in consumer prices. According to data from a Bank of Korea survey released on Wednesday, ordinary people expect consumer prices to rise 3.2% in 2024, down from November's 3.4% and the lowest in 20 months. Inflation expectation figures are closely watched as upward movement can cause businesses to raise prices or workers to ask for pay raises, leading to more upward pressure on inflation moving forward. Meanwhile, South Korea's inflation rose at a slower pace last month, while staying above at 3% for the fourth straight month amid high energy and agricultural goods prices.
Good morning, I'm Kim Jong, and now we turn over to stories from around the world. We begin today in Turkey, where its parliament's Foreign Affairs Commission has approved Sweden's bid to join NATO on Tuesday. Sweden's accession will now have to be approved at the General Assembly at the Turkish parliament. Turkey's decision on Tuesday marks a key step towards the expansion of the Western military alliance, as Turkey has been delaying its approval for 19 months, demanding security-related concessions from Sweden. Turkey's change of position is linked to the US backing of the sales of F-16 fighter jets, a condition which the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan openly requested in return for the ratification of Sweden's NATO membership. The Turkish Foreign Affairs Commission is controlled by Erdogan's ruling Justice and Development Party, which also holds a majority of seats in the parliament together with its allies, meaning Sweden's NATO bid is likely to be approved in the General Assembly. Now, the United States on Tuesday banned the import of Apple Watches. The import ban comes from a patent dispute between Apple and medical technology company Masimo. Apple has lodged an appeal, but the current ban will hold until at least January 12th, when the US Customs and Border Protection will decide whether to accept Apple's request to pause the sales ban while the court considers its appeal and the redesigned versions of the Apple Watch. The US International Trade Commission ordered banning of imports and sales of Apple Watches following a complaint filed by Masimo accusing Apple of poaching its employees and stealing its blood oxygen level measuring technology, which has been featured in Apple's smartwatches since its Series 6 model in 2020. The import and sales ban is likely to affect the new Series 9 and Ultra 2 Apple Watches the most. Now to Nigeria's north-central Plateau state, and reports on Tuesday of the killing of at least 140 people by gunmen over the weekend. The attacks were the latest in a series of mass killings in the West African nation this year, which the government blames on an ongoing farmer-herder crisis. According to the state's governor, the assailants targeted 17 communities in senseless and unprovoked attacks on Saturday and Sunday. Amnesty International confirmed 140 deaths, but expects the death toll to rise. While no group has claimed responsibility, authorities are pointing to nomadic herders who have been accused of other similar incidents in the region amid ongoing conflict over access to land and water.
Good morning. We are getting relief from a severe cold wave this week. Temperatures will range similar to yesterday, hovering above the seasonal norms. But of course, it's that unwelcome find us as western parts of Korea are engulfed by high levels of dust. More smog has moved in overnight, so it will be dustier today and for the remainder of the week. Meanwhile, East Coast regions are being gripped by dry air with a dry advisory remaining in place. Morning temperatures are 2 to 3 degrees higher than the same time yesterday. Then highs in Seoul will be at 7 degrees, Gwangju at 10 degrees this afternoon. Skies will be mostly sunny for the central regions, Gyeongsang-Pukto and Jeollabuk-do provinces, but the rest of the country will see clouds passing by. New Year's weekend is shaping up to be a snowy one. Travelers need to bear the snow in mind and plan accordingly, but at least there will not be a major cold snap. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Thursday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.